Universal Casualty, Super Q,
los Miami Dolphins y tú, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Son los Dolphins, nuestros Miami Dolphins, el team número 1 en toda la nación. Y son ellos orgullo de Miami y de todos los latinos en la capital del sol. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Este año no me hablen de los Redskins, no me hablen de los Chargers, ni de los Dallas Cowboys, porque los Dolphins son número 1 y lo demostrarán al llegar al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Nuestra línea está mejor que nunca y nuestra defensiva fue siempre la mejor. Y es por eso que yo no tengo duda que los Miami Dolphins ganarán el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, con los Miami Dolphins, rumbo al Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl. Con los Miami Dolphins me voy para el Super Bowl.
Universal Casualty
Y Super Q, los primeros. Bueno, caballeros, todo el mundo que cante con nosotros. Dame una D, dame una O, dame una L, dame una P, una H, una I, una N, una S, que es lo que tenemos. Miami Dolphins. Me voy para el Super Bowl. 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 Me voy para el Super Bowl.
You're listening to the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network.
There's a team Dolphin fans. Football is mighty rough. Winning gets awful tough. We're rooting for the Dolphins. Our mighty, mighty Dolphins. We're rooting for the Dolphins. Our mighty, mighty Dolphins.
Hello, Miami Dolphin fans, and welcome to the Same Old Dolphins Show, sponsored by BetUS, part of the DolphinsTalk.com podcast network. I'm Josh Katzker. With me today and every day is my brother from the exact same mother, Aaron the Brain. Aaron, say hello to the people.
Hello to the people.
Hey, Brain. We're doing the show on Friday. We've been trying to get back on the regular schedule of doing the show on Thursdays, but we couldn't do the show last night because you were seeing Weird Al Yankovic for the second consecutive night.
Yes.
How was that?
That was amazing. So really, really glad that I got to go both nights because he played a completely different show the second night. And the first night, if I was only going to go to one show, the first show would have been the one to go to because that was the show that he played really 3 or 4 of like my all-time favorites.
Fantastic.
And then the second show was equally as cool because he really played a lot of songs that really showcased the band's musical talents, and they really jammed out, and they did a lot of more artistic things.
That's cool. Did they play Rumbo al Super Bowl?
That was the one thing that was missing. I was really disappointed.
Next time you go see Weird Al, we need to make sure that you put in a request to have him play more Miami Dolphins related songs. That's what we need to do next time you go see Weird Al. So Weird Al, if you're watching, make sure next time you play in South Florida, you do more Miami Dolphins related stuff.
Well, he'll play that sports team song or whatever.
There you go. Well, I'm glad you had a good time. You had a good time watching the Weird Al show. 2 Weird Al shows for that matter. That's great. But it's now time to switch your focus back to the Miami Dolphins, and it's been yet another interesting week. What a time to be a fan of the Miami Dolphins. Just when you felt things were finally starting to go the right way, team's getting into a groove, team looks really genuinely good, like they could really be something. Then suddenly they run into this brick wall, and now there's all kinds of stuff going on. Now, there does seem to be some good news on the horizon, but here's where we are. We still have Tua Tagovailoa in the concussion protocol. We still have Teddy Bridgewater in the concussion protocol. So because of that, on Sunday, the Dolphins taking on the Minnesota Vikings will have Skylar Thompson starting at quarterback. And as we are live on Friday evening, Teddy Bridgewater still hasn't been cleared. If he is not cleared tomorrow on Saturday, then Reed Sinnett will be the Dolphins' backup quarterback on Sunday. So, there's got to be a reason that Mike McDaniel made the decision early in this week that he decided that, listen, I'm going to have Skylar Thompson for sure all week ready to go. So that's the guy I'm building my game plan with. I don't want to build a game plan with Teddy Bridgewater with the idea that he might play only to have him not play. I'm building the game plan around Skylar Thompson. So Skylar Thompson going to start a quarterback for the Dolphins on Sunday. Teddy Bridgewater may be available as a backup. It does sound like, regardless, that Tua and Teddy will be on the sidelines to be there as support guys and to be there to provide some feedback to Skylar and help him out along the way, which is more than he had last week against the Jets when Tua didn't travel to the game and Teddy was taken to the locker room and not allowed back on the sideline the rest of the game. But regardless, that's where we are. So it's still totally unclear. It seems to me that I have seen no evidence that Teddy Bridgewater was actually concussed in this game on Sunday, although the fact that he has not yet cleared concussion protocol is a little bit of a head scratcher, but maybe it's just the process taking a little bit longer to go through all the steps necessary to clear the protocol. But hopefully he'll be back at least on the sideline in some capacity on Sunday. But regardless, the Miami Dolphins are facing the Minnesota Vikings on Sunday with an opportunity to stop this 2-game losing skid and to get back to winning ways, although it's going to be a tough game perhaps a little bit tougher than we might have thought it was going to be a couple of weeks ago. We're going to preview that game for you today on the Same Old Dolphin Show. But before we do that, a reminder to you, if you're not doing so already, make sure you're following us on Twitter. I'm at Amplified to Rock. He is at Aaron the Brain. That's at Aaron the Brain. The show is at Same Old Dolphins. We invite you to download, rate, review, and subscribe to the Same Old Dolphin Show. Same Old Dolphin Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, SoundCloud, anywhere you get your podcasts. Make sure you subscribe to the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel. We're almost up to 3,000 subs. So if you haven't subscribed yet, please do like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications so you know when we go live, and make sure finally that you're visiting dolphinstalk.com each and every day, your one-stop shop for all things Miami Dolphins. Brain, here we go. Miami Dolphins, Minnesota Vikings this Sunday. Let's first talk about what the Dolphins offense is going to look like, because I think this is probably the biggest question mark. We don't know yet if Teron Armstead is going to play. Signs are pointing towards Austin Jackson being back on Sunday for the Dolphins. So that's certainly a good thing. But so maybe Greg Little is shifting over to the left side as Austin Jackson comes in on the right side. But other than that, we know that we're going to have Skylar Thompson at quarterback. And yeah, I guess it's really going to be a question of, can the Dolphins operate a functional offense? I mean, and it wasn't like the offense was terrible and horrible in the game last Sunday against the Jets. It certainly wasn't great. It certainly wasn't at its best, but it wasn't unwatchable. It wasn't Washington Commanders at Chicago Bears level bad, for those of you that watched the Thursday night football game this week. But you know, it was at least functional. So what are the Dolphins going to need to do on Sunday, Brain, to beat the Minnesota Vikings? At least to move the ball and score points against them.
Yeah.
Anthony Pereira has an answer.
And that's a great start. Run the
ball. He says run the ball, and about 24 exclamation points.
Did you count those exclamations?
It was an estimation.
Okay. Look, obviously getting the running game going is going to be helpful. And I think there's going to be opportunities against this Vikings defense. They like to play very conservatively on the defensive end. They like to play the, 5 in the secondary. They typically are going to drop they're going to play a lot of soft zone, a lot of, 2 deep safeties. The corners really bailing out to cover a quarter of the field. So they're leaving a lot of space on the perimeter because they don't really have faith in their corners athletically or even their safeties athletically. So they play really umbrella coverage, and their game plan is just to not give up the big play. And so what that does is it gives you a lot of space to really operate. And I think that plays into the hands of a Dolphins offense with a third string quarterback, because as much as you would like to say, well, you've got Tyreek Hill and you've got Jalen Waddle, so let's attack and go down the field. You don't really want your third string quarterback who, doesn't have a lot of experience of reading coverages, having to decide when is the time to make that kind of throw. You'd rather have him make very easy reads where he's got guys open and you get the ball to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle in space and you let them operate. And then furthermore, by them having their safeties back like that, if you can make them, if you can spread them out even a little bit and you have a light box, which Minnesota has basically done against every team that they've played this year, you've given yourself numbers in the running game. And the Dolphins, I think, can build a lot off of what they did last week in the running game with Raheem Mostert. Now, Mostert showed up on the injury report this week, and so that's something to keep an eye on. But assuming he goes, that's your lead back. And I think given a week to prepare for this, I would expect that, especially getting Austin Jackson back, who's a far better run blocker than Greg Little, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities for the Dolphins to get a ground game going, and I think they can move the ball, getting it to Waddle and Tyreek Hill in space. So I think that's going to be the game plan. To me, the question mark comes in, well, can you avoid the negative plays? Because if you're going to go that route and you're going to have to go 10, 12 plays to score touchdowns, it really is, can you avoid the negative plays to put yourself in a bad down and distance? And when you get into the red zone, can you capitalize with touchdowns over field goals? We know that the offense, with Tua, was doing a phenomenal job of cashing in red zone opportunities into touchdowns. But we haven't seen that yet when it hasn't been Tua.
That's true. That's true. But I do think that 2-minute drill against the Jets, not the 2-minute drill, because it really wasn't operated like a 2-minute offense, but that last drive of the first half against the Jets, where Skylar Thompson had the offense, played within himself, and they did the slow, methodical drive down the field that ended in a touchdown. That's going to be the way to go. And yes, we know from the past with this Dolphins team that it is very difficult to do that, to take a very long drive and go all the way down the field when you're doing it little chunks at a time, because then there's also not a whole lot of room for error. Because if you have a holding penalty that knocks you back 10 yards, now you got a really tough situation. But I think if the Dolphins can play smart and play within themselves and clean up a lot of, clean up that offensive line to a certain degree, and you really got to hope that Teron Armstead plays, because that will help significantly. Because that's the other thing. Not only was Skylar Thompson in on zero preparation, he was in for the vast majority of that game with all but 7 sacks, all but 7 plays. He was behind an offensive line that didn't have Teron Armstead. So if he plays and the team can be together on that offensive line, I think it's going to be okay. I think it's going to be functional. And Minnesota is not some great defense out there. I think in defensive DVOA, they're number 28 in the league. Of course, the Dolphins number 29 right now. So when we move to the other side of the ball, we'll have that conversation. But I do think there is the room for the Dolphins in this game to make some things happen on offense, even though they're shorthanded, particularly at the quarterback position. What about the other side of the ball, though, Brain? Defense. Now, this is the question, because Minnesota has a lot of weapons. And, of course, the biggest weapon that they have is Justin Jefferson. And he is a wide receiver that has been proven that it is very difficult to keep him covered. And it's not to say that while he's the big weapon that they have, that he's the only weapon. They also have Dalvin Cook out of the backfield. They also have Alexander Mattison in the backfield, who is not much of a step down from Dalvin Cook. In addition to that, they've got Adam Thielen, who, while not the receiver that he used to be, is still very productive. They've got KJ Osborne, who is up and coming. They've got tight end Irv Smith, who can be problematic. This is a team with some weapons, but they also have Kirk Cousins at quarterback, a quarterback who has proven time and time again, if you can get to him and get to him often, he is prone to making mistakes. So the question is, can the Dolphins get to him? There are some good offensive linemen on this Minnesota Vikings team. So can the Dolphins generate heat? Are they going to need to blitz? And if they blitz, are they risking Justin Jefferson blowing the doors off of the place? These are the questions.
So, number one, look, Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook are elite weapons, but the rest of the cast is really not anything to be super, super scared of. Adam Thielen is a guy that can hurt you, but he's not going to hurt you the way that he used to hurt you, 4 years ago when he was racking up, 100-yard games and scoring and was one of the best receivers in the league. I think when you look at what the Dolphins did defensively against the Bengals, who are the only other team that the Dolphins have played thus far this, look, Stephon Diggs is an elite wide receiver, and they played him a little bit differently than they played Jamar Chase. But if you look at at those two games, in the Bills game, the Dolphins, what they did was they put X on Stephon Diggs, and they put bracket coverage around Gabe Davis, and it sort of worked. I think Stephon Diggs got, had some big plays, but he didn't go off. And at the end of the day, the Dolphins kept the Bills in check. Against the Bengals, the Dolphins kind of did the opposite thing where they put X one-on-one against T. Higgins, and they put bracket coverage on Jamar Chase. And aside from the one big play where you could argue that if X plays the ball a little bit better, it's actually an interception. But at the end of the day, it's like a long touchdown pass that he gives up. But aside from that play, until X goes out with the injury in the fourth quarter, they completely held Jamar Chase in check. And for the most part, it held T. Higgins in check as well, and the Bengals offense in general. So I think those are the two ways that you can go at it. I would say, especially with X coming off of an injury and with having the success that they had against Jamar Chase in bracket coverage, rolling Javon Holland over the top, I would expect that they would do that. Let X handle Adam Thielen, not a threat to really explode and beat X deep or anything like that. And I think you can contain this Minnesota passing game. You could always adjust if it doesn't work. Like if you're doing the bracket coverage thing on Justin Jefferson and Justin Jefferson is going off, you can always switch it up. But I would expect that would be plan A. And then as far as Dalvin Cook, I think the Dolphins defense has done a nice job defending the run. And I think that they'll be fine in that regard. They got to tackle better. And I think the onus is really on the defense coming into this game. The onus was on the defense going into the Jets game, knowing that you had a backup quarterback, and they really didn't come through. They played admirably for 3 quarters, and things kind of spiraled on them. But even as admirably as they played, the big plays kept happening. Now, as far as whether or not the Dolphins bring pressure, I think they've got to be strategic about it. I think you can bring pressure on the 3rd and long situations. As long as, I think, Kirk Cousins has the track record of making a lot of mistakes in those situations under pressure.
Sure does.
But I don't think you need to be overly aggressive with it. So I think that you just need to trust your defense. They really need to play a disciplined game. I think on both sides of the ball, this is really going to be a test of how structured and disciplined the Dolphins can be. Because I don't think the Vikings are some juggernaut team. They're 4-1, but they're 4-1 by the skin of their teeth. They're really a fraudulent 4-1. They could very easily be 2-3. I think that they're kind of on the same level as the Dolphins, and I think that the Dolphins have that South Florida heat in their advantage in this game. Maybe not to the same extent that they had it against Buffalo, because it won't be quite as hot, but Minnesota doesn't know this South Florida heat. So if the Dolphins can just play a disciplined, solid football game and they don't beat themselves, I think there's going to be opportunities in this game where they can create turnovers, and actually have a positive game script, which is something that we really have not seen from this team since week 1. I think that there's going to be opportunities, but if the defense doesn't set the tone, if the defense is giving up, long touchdown drives early in the game and we're having to play from behind, then it could be another long night.
Yeah.
Long day.
And nobody wants to see that. I mean, that if there's one thing about this season, it's been really interesting. We talked about after the last couple of seasons, talked about the importance of the Dolphins getting out to a fast start in the season. And they certainly did that. They got a fast start in the season. The problem is they've gotten this fast start in the season, but they largely have gotten slow starts in all of their games, in 4 or 5 games. It's been I guess not. I guess it was an okay start in the Cincinnati game, but it wasn't great. Cincinnati was, I guess, more neutral, but it was certainly not the best start against Buffalo, not the best start against Baltimore, and certainly not the best start against the Jets. You'd like to see the Dolphins play from ahead more instead of having to play catch up as they've had to do. So, we're going to see how this Dolphins team fares on Sunday against the Vikings, and we'll make our predictions for that game in a second, Brain. But first, football is back, baby. And our new sponsor, True Classic, wants you to look and feel your best, even after a couple of brewskis are going full force on your fantasy football draft. Sure, it's football season, but it's also butt to couch season. Luckily, True Classic has the absolute best fitting clothing a man can buy. Snug in the arms and chest with a little extra space in the torso, their t-shirts are designed to keep you cozy and highlight your best assets no matter what you're up to. So if your special someone is upset that you're watching football all day, at least he can look good doing it. True Classic has already helped over 2 million men find the perfect fit at an affordable price, and our listeners get access to the best deal they offer. For a limited time only, get 25% off with the promo code DolphinsTalk at trueclassic.com. Not only are you getting a t-shirt designed for the male body, but the first thing you'll notice is how soft it is. The colors are prime too, and you can even match your team of choice. True Classic doesn't just stop at tees. They're your one-stop shop for men's essentials. From polos and workout shirts to the same flattering fit to boxer briefs designed with a pouch to keep your bulge nice and comfortable. All of their gear is top-notch quality at reasonable prices. So it's about time you got your fit together. Upgrade your wardrobe with True Classic. Get 25% off at trueclassic.com with the code DolphinsTalk. Free shipping included on purchases over $100. That's 25% off at trueclassic.com with the promo code DolphinsTalk. If there's one bet you should make this football season, it's on True Classic. True Classic. Look good. Feel good. So, Brain, it's just about time to make our predictions for the game on Sunday. But first, I want to talk to you about another piece of news that has come out. And that is that a cornerback for the Washington Commanders by the name of William Jackson III, he wants out. He wants out from Washington. And I think it's an interesting question to talk about whether the Dolphins should make a move for him, because he is a cornerback that does excel at man-to-man coverage, which is something the Dolphins want from their cornerbacks. We also know that Byron Jones is a question mark at this point because we don't know where he is in his process. Dolphins are paying him a lot of money, but he got this procedure done in the offseason, and we thought he would be ready for the start of the season. He wasn't. He's still not ready. We seem to have no clarity at all about when he's going to be back. And this week it's been crickets as the Dolphins have been dealing with all these other things. It's a concern to me about Byron Jones. So the question is it a worthwhile endeavor for the Dolphins to go out there and kick the tires on a trade for William Jackson to come in and be that other cornerback opposite Xavien Howard while they're waiting for Byron Jones to come back whenever that's going to be? Also worth noting, Kader Kohu doubtful for Sunday's game with an oblique. So the Dolphins might be down yet another person in the secondary.
Yeah, I mean, the secondary injuries have been piling up. It's been really brutal. But this Byron Jones thing has been the most frustrating piece of the puzzle because it went from a surprise that he was on the PUP to he's going to be ready for this season to he's on the PUP, but he'll probably be back, as soon as he's eligible in week 5 to now he's not even eligible. He's not even good enough to practice. There's really no timetable on him. So it's just, it's really frustrating because you're paying a ton of money to your cornerback room and, one guy that you're really counting on that really makes this defense work, it just hasn't been out there, and we don't know when he's going to be out there. So as far as the William Jackson stuff, look, he's got no guaranteed money next year. And that's kind of the big thing is that, you you could potentially trade him, or you could potentially trade, a day 3 pick for him and basically just treat it as a rental for the rest of the year and be done with it. And your cost is a day 3 pick. And so if you look at it that way, then you say, well, what are you really losing? You're really only paying him like $3-4 million because like his roster bonus was half of his cap number, and you're 5 games into the season on his $5 million base salary. So like, what are you really like taking on? You're not taking on a whole lot. It seems like there's a lot more to gain, even though it's a short-term fix. It's a really good Band-Aid, I think. And then it also gives you the luxury that, assuming X and Byron Jones are eventually healthy at the same time, and then you have William Jackson III, he becomes your number 3 corner, and it just makes your entire your cornerback room, which is like in dire straits right now, all of a sudden becomes probably the best cornerback room in the league, especially when you consider your number 4 corner would then be Nick Needham, and your number 5 corner would then be Kader Kohu, who's played really well. So, I mean, I would do it for a 5th round pick. I'm not going to get overly excited about what it means long term, because if the guy plays really well, like you're kind of stuck where you're strapped for cash, where you're not going to just jettison Byron Jones. You're not going to keep him over. So you understand that if you bring in a William Jackson III, it is strictly a rental for this year that you are giving away a draft pick for. And we've already, lost some draft picks for next year, which are going to continue to be more and more important, considering the cap situation being a little bit tighter. And even though $3 or $4 million is not a ton, it's $3 or $4 million that you would otherwise be able to roll over towards next year. And then you've got big decisions to make long-term with players like Christian Wilkins and Robert Hunt, who are going to be due big extensions. Brandon Jones, like, you're going to need to be extending players soon, and that's going to factor into your cap conversation as well, where every few $1 million is going to be important. So you have to ask yourself, are you trading a 5th round pick for a guy to hold down the fort for like 2 or 3 games, or are you trading a 5th round pick because you feel like this guy puts us over the top? And then the other part of the question is, well, what's the end game? Is the end game just to be like, a 10-11 win team that makes the playoffs? Or do we feel like bringing in William Jackson, if everything else is healthy, if everybody else is healthy, that he makes us Super Bowl contenders? Because I'm not sold that he makes us Super Bowl contenders. So, like, are we giving up something in the future as far as cap space and a draft pick just to win 1 or 2 more games? If it's more than a 5th round pick, I don't think I'm doing it. But if you can get him for a 5th round pick, like, the odds would say a 5th round pick is probably not going to help you that very much. And I would like to add an impact player to the defense.
Well, and especially considering the fact that he's not, the Dolphins could bring him in for the rest of this year, and they have no obligation to pay him beyond that. The way his contract is structured, I believe the Dolphins would be able to move on from him next year without taking any kind of cap hit at all. So they could easily trade him for a 5th round.
It's not a cap hit. Like, he's got no, that's what I'm saying. It's a rental, and you could get rid of him and not have any financial obligation. But even if you're only paying him $3 or $4 million this year, that's $3 or $4 million that you would otherwise be able to roll over to next year.
Sure. But, there are other things that are out there. Like, for example, we could cut Noah Igbenogany to open up a roster spot. And that is, I think this is a situation where if they bring in William Jackson, Noah Igbenogany is going to be on that inactive list every Sunday for the rest of the season. And after this year, he's gone.
He's not even going to make it out of this year. If they make the trade for William Jackson III, Noah Igbenogany is not on this roster.
Maybe the
honestly,
Dolphins
even if they
maybe
don't
you trade Noah Igbenogany for William Jackson III.
Even if you don't make the trade for William Jackson III, if at any point this secondary is fully healthy just with the guys that are on the roster, like if X, Byron Jones, Kader Kohu, Nick Needham are all healthy at the same time, and the Dolphins need a roster spot for, for whoever it is coming off of like IR, like Noah Igbenogany is the first guy on that. There's a very short list of guys that you can really get away with cutting right now. It's probably Noah Igbenogany and Justin Bethel.
Yeah. But
And
Bethel
then
at least Bethel provides some special teams value.
And maybe like one of the tight ends.
Yeah, I don't see that happening. I think Noah Igbenogany is the guy. Mike Lewis wants to know if we're going to see Eric Ezukama soon. I think it's possible. We could see him soon. I mean, I don't know if there's anything going on with Cedric Wilson, but he certainly is not living up to the contract that he received at this point in time. And I don't know what's going on there. So I would say it's a possibility that we could see Ezukama soon. The other thing is, though, the Trent Sherfield and River Craycraft are actually really contributing a great deal. And with them being contributors, I think it cuts down on the need for Ezukama to contribute at that level. But I think if anything should happen to the depth at wide receiver, it will be Ezukama time. But I think the Dolphins are happy right now to keep him in more of a reserve role where he's not seeing a whole lot of action and he's just kind of observing right now. And I think that's fine. But yeah, I'm more worried about the Cedric Wilson situation right now, quite frankly.
Yeah, I don't think it's as much about Cedric Wilson's ability as much as it is about the system and the personnel. When they signed Cedric Wilson,
that's true. It was pre
Tyreek Hill. And so Cedric Wilson was expected to come in and be like wide receiver, 2A or 2B, depending on, where you put Mike Gesicki in that hierarchy.
2B or not 2B?
That's the question.
That's why I asked. It's not really a question, though.
Yeah,
anyway,
and
continue.
And Ezukama, he was obviously drafted, before they got Tyreek Hill as well. So they were looking to add, wide receivers to this room and to this depth chart to give them options. But now you've got Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, and you're not putting those guys on the bench. Those guys are going to see just about every offensive snap. And you're also doing that in an offense that needs to play with a tight end and plays with a fullback. And in many cases wants to play with two tight ends because one of the tight ends that we have doesn't really block. In fact,
one of them,
the case that none of our tight ends block.
I was going to say,
but so like, there's something to be said about foresight and about they paid Cedric Wilson a lot of money. They paid Mike Gesicki a lot of money, and they're not really using either of them for what they're good at. You could also make a case that you could make that same argument for their backup quarterback, although it seems to be more injury related or concussion with quotation marks related. But I don't think we're going to see too much of Eric Ezukama unless, and I think the same thing for Cedric Wilson, unless those other receivers ahead of them on the depth chart get hurt. Because I just don't think there's any need for it. Why are you going to, and I don't think it has anything to do with Ezukama's ability. I don't think it has anything to do with Cedric Wilson's ability. But why are you going to force them into the lineup? At the expense of Tyreek Hill and Jalen? Like, why would you do that? At the expense of your running game? You're not going to do that either. So it's just kind of a matter of circumstance. Now, what I would say is that it makes both of those players, particularly Cedric Wilson, an interesting candidate as a possible trade piece, because this was a guy that they had a plan for, but now the plan has completely changed because you got Tyreek Hill. Cedric Wilson probably has some value. What can you get for him, though? I don't know what his value is, but I know that there is some value there, and the Dolphins have to make a decision at some point. I'd be shocked if they weren't shopping him. I'd be shocked if they weren't shopping Mike Gesicki.
It'd be interesting to see what you might get for a Cedric Wilson from somebody like maybe a Green Bay. Chicago's not really looking to add to their roster at this point, but the Giants are a team that needs a receiver real bad. That's a real good one.
I would guess for teams that are fringe playoff teams or teams that maybe weren't expected to make the playoffs or are considered fringe playoff teams that are looking to add to their wide receiver room, I would guess that you might be able to swing a day 2 pick, probably a day 3 pick, but you might be able to swing a day 2 pick if you get close to the deadline and it's a team that feels like they desperately need to add some talent to their wide receiver room and they feel like they're a piece away from making that playoff push, and they find themselves in that situation. And they can trade for a guy who's under, who just signed a contract. They don't have to pay him his signing bonus, and they don't have to give him any kind of crazy extension. He's on a very manageable contract. I would think that you could probably get a day 2 pick for Cedric Wilson in the right scenario where you've got a team that feels like they need to add to make a playoff push to their wide receiving core.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. Although at this point, I think we got to wait until the Dolphins have a fully healthy quarterback situation, because Cedric Wilson is also the emergency quarterback for this team at the moment. So maybe you wait until you get Tua healed up a little bit before you make that decision. But yeah, it's something to think about. So anyway, there's the situation. You ready to make some picks for this Vikings game on Sunday, Brain?
Let's do it.
All right. Before we do
go
that,
first?
well, you want me to go first?
Yeah, I want you to go first.
I'll go first. But before I do that, I got to tell you, everybody, to go to manscaped.com and use the promo code DolphinsTalk so you can save 20% off your order and get free shipping worldwide, baby. Worldwide free shipping with manscaped.com. So the best below the belt grooming products available: razors, soaps, shampoos, you name it, they've got it at manscaped.com. Use the promo code DolphinsTalk. You're going to save 20%. You're going to get free shipping. So we highly recommend it if you haven't done so already. And just let me say once again, for the record, the Manscaped lip balm is really good stuff. So if nothing else, go over there and get 20% off that lip balm. So let's make a prediction on Sunday. Dolphins hosting the Vikings. I think the Dolphins have an 8-game winning streak at Hard Rock Stadium. So they're doing well there. They're happy to be home after a couple road games. It's been a couple weeks since the Dolphins have been at home. And so they get to come home, get a little home cooking for this game against the Vikings. But it's a tough situation dealing with, having your third string quarterback in there. And even though I do see a way the Dolphins can win this game, I feel like I'm going to have a hard time sitting here and telling you with a straight face, honestly, that I believe the Dolphins are going to win this game. I'm just kind of down on them at the moment, just because of the situation. No matter who you are, no matter what team you are in the NFL, if you're down to your third string quarterback, it's hard to go out there and beat another NFL team, particularly an NFL team with the kind of weapons that the Minnesota Vikings has. I expect this to actually be a little bit of a high scoring affair. I don't know what the over under is on this game, but my inclination is, depending on where that number is set at, is to go over. But I think that the Vikings are probably going to end up getting the win in this game. I'm going to say something along the lines of, I'm going to say 31-20.
Interesting. By the way, the Vikings are a 3-point favorite, and the over/under is 45.
So there you go.
like
I'm
the
taking the Vikings. I'm taking the Vikings in the over.
So you remember how last week when we did the preview show and we were in the same room, and
we said we didn't want to see Skylar Thompson play because it meant that Teddy Bridgewater got hurt?
we said that among other things.
Yeah, I do remember that.
And I said that coming out of the Cincinnati game, amidst all of the depression and all of the frustration about all of the social media takes and everything that was going on surrounding Tua and the concussion protocol, I actually felt good going into the Jets game. But as we got closer and closer to the Jets game and more news started coming out about other Dolphins injuries, that I just got more and more concerned. And even though I picked the Dolphins to win that game, I kind of felt going into that I was getting more and more concerned as we went into it. I feel the opposite coming into this game.
Oh, yeah.
Coming out of the Jets game, it felt very bleak. It just felt very like, yeah, it's going to be very difficult for this team to win given these injuries, if something doesn't change. But you got good news with X. You got Austin Jackson coming back, which amazingly is good news. Probably wouldn't have said that a month or two ago. Tyreek Hill seems to have avoided any sort of injury, so he looks fine. The Dolphins got their running game going last week, and I think it's something that's been building. And this Vikings team is really not that impressive. I mean, this Vikings team was, had a strip with less than 2 minutes away from against the Chicago Bears to facing a potential game-losing field goal.
It's true.
To one of the worst teams in football at home last week. They also, needed 2 missed field goals to win that game against New Orleans earlier in the year. Their defense does not really scare me. So if you wanted, and if you were drawing up like what kind of defense do you want to play if you've got a third string quarterback and you really want to generate your running game, you want to play a defense that's going to play all of their secondary back and you're going to be facing light boxes all day. You factor that in with the lasting impression that we have of a team from the North coming to play at Hard Rock Stadium was the Bills having like half of their offensive line just completely gassed with like guys being on the injury report with heat illness. It's real down here. And that 8-game winning streak that the Dolphins have down here, yeah, part of it is propped up on the back of playing some bad quarterbacks, but part of it is legitimately a really good home field advantage. The Dolphins need to play a really smart football game, and they need to play a really disciplined football game to win. And I think this game is a big test, not just for the team, but for Mike McDaniel as a head coach. Because the weight of this game, the difference between coming out of this game 4-2, potentially getting Tua back next week, and then looking at this stretch of schedule and feeling positive about things at 4-2 versus what it would look like at 3-3, having lost 3 in a row. It's a huge, huge difference. I think this is a game. I think you're going to have to win ugly. I think your defense is going to need to set the tone, but I think the Dolphins have enough to win this game. And I think in the face of all of the adversity and everything kind of looking like it's not going Miami's way, I feel like this is a game that Miami wins because, you know, the Vikings, there are some people that will say when the Vikings lose this game this week that they're the same old Vikings.
That's amazing.
The NFL is a weird league sometimes.
It is.
And sometimes everything feels like it's going one way and then it takes a weird left turn. And at the end of the day, it usually makes sense. And so when you look at the Vikings and you say, well, there's a 4-1 team, but they really haven't played that well. And here's the Dolphins that are 3-2, and they've shown flashes of being really legit, but things have gotten really ugly. I can see both of these teams exiting the game on Sunday with the same record at 4-2. I think that's what's going to happen. I think the Dolphins win. I think they win it. I think they get some turnovers. They win a close game, 24-22.
How about that? A big win for the Dolphins, says the brain. Same old Vikings.
Keep in mind, I am 1-4 on the season thus far.
Brain.
Wait, you're going to show the
those
bottom
of
of that? The bottom of that is the best part.
2008 play. So I was holding up the towel that we had on the wall behind us when we did the show together in South Florida last week. It says the wait is over, believe in now, and then at the bottom it says 2008 playoffs. Those of you who remember the 2008 playoffs, the brain and I were at that game together as the Dolphins got lambasted at home by the Baltimore Ravens. It was a rough time. But the brain is believing in now, and he believes the Dolphins are going to get a big win on Sunday against the Vikings. We hope that you do too. Let's see. We got some comments here. Joy Miller in the chat says Vikings 33, Dolphins 14. But Bobby B says 20-19. Fins win. We love to see it. If you want to leave us live comments telling us what you think the score is going to be, telling us what your pulse check is, all of that stuff, we encourage you to download, rate, review, and subscribe to the Same Old Dolphins Show. But on top of that, we invite you to subscribe to the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel where you can watch us live. We are almost to 3,000 subscribers on the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel, so we'd really appreciate it if you haven't done so yet. If you're listening to this in podcast form after the fact, head on over to YouTube, subscribe to the Dolphins Talk YouTube channel. We really appreciate it. If you're watching this live, like the video. If you're watching it after the fact, like this video, subscribe to the channel, turn on that notifications bell so you're notified every time we go live so you can join in on the fun. And then if you're on Twitter, follow us. I'm at Amplified to Rock. He's at Aaron the Brain. That's at Aaron the Brain. And the show is at Same Old Dolphins. We will be back early next week reflecting on this Dolphins-Vikings game. Hopefully it is a game that the Dolphins have won to bring their record to 4-2. And then we can look ahead to the game on Sunday night. I think the Dolphins' first Sunday night game in 6-7 years, something like that. They'll be taking on Brian Flores and the Pittsburgh Steelers, celebrating the 1972 perfect Miami Dolphins team. It's going to be a beautiful game on Sunday night, and with a little bit of luck, maybe QB1 is going to be back in the saddle as well. So lots to look forward to next week. But first, we got this Sunday to take care of. Let's go out there. Let's get a big dub, Miami Dolphins. Let's go. Let's get it done. Let's go 4-2. And maybe Kansas City will help us out a little bit, and the Dolphins can be back on top of the AFC East by themselves. We'll see what happens. But until then, take care of yourselves and each other. And as always, go Dolphins!
It's Skylar season, baby.